All right, get to that time, huh?
It's our third one.
Yep, it's that time.
This time, Robert, I'm gonna ask you to go ahead on and call the roll there.
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
Present.
Dickerson,
Present.
McBride,
Present.
Livingston,
Present.
Teratio,
Present.
Walker,
Present.
Kennedy, Manning,
Here.
Jackson, Myers,
Present.
Newton,
Here.
Thank you very much. Let me go ahead and call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. The first item on our agenda is our invocation and followed by a pledge of allegiance. I'm going to ask the Honorable Bill Malinowski to lead the invocation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Heavenly Father, thank you for carrying us through this day. While darkness may bring fear and loneliness, may we instead find relaxation. We pray that you help those who go to bed hungry, those missing loved ones, or are restless due to turmoil in their lives, and especially those affected by the current pandemic. We ask for your divine intervention in all these things. Amen.
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 Now, if you'll join me with the Pledge of Allegiance, I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to the
To
flag
the flag of the United States of America
and
and
to the
to the
republic
republic for which it
stands
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible,
With
liberty.
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malinowski.
You're
Next
welcome.
item is item number 4, and that's presentation of proclamation. Ms. Roberts.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. A proclamation honoring National Public Works Week, May 17 through 23rd, 2020. Whereas public works services provided in our community are an integral part of our citizens' daily lives, the support of and understanding by an informed citizenry is vital to the efficient operation of public works services and programs such as engineering, local roads, stormwater management, solid waste management, recycling, beautification, general labor, and airport management. And the health and safety and comfort of this community greatly depends on these facilities, infrastructure, and services. The quality and effectiveness of these facilities and infrastructure, as well as their planning, design, maintenance, and construction, is vitally dependent upon the efforts and skills of local public works officials. The efficiency of the qualified and dedicated personnel who staff public works departments is heavily influenced by the people's attitude and understanding of the work they perform. Now, therefore, Richland County Council proclaims the week of May 17th through May 23rd, 2020 as National Public Works Week. Richland County Council calls on all citizens and civic organizations to equip themselves with the challenges involved in providing public works services and to recognize the contributions which the public works staff make each day to our health, safety, and comfort, signed and sealed on this 19th day of May, 2020.
Thank you. That brings us to item 5 on our agenda. That is approval of minutes for our special call meeting on May 5th. Chair, entertain the motion.
So move.
It's been moved.
Second.
Proper second. Any reference questions regarding the minutes? Changes? There being none, I'll ask Ms. Roberts to call the roll for the minutes. Approval of the minutes.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Kennedy, Manning,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton. It passes.
Thank you. And for the record, Mrs. Kennedy did inform me that she would not be able to attend the meeting today.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Ms. Kennedy is now joining the meeting.
Okay, thank
You
you.
may see her in just a few minutes.
That brings us to item 6, the adoption of the agenda. Mr. Brown, I think you had something you wanted to be considered for the agenda.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. Council Member Dickerson told me to be brief. So under the administrator's report, I simply want to give you, add 2 updates. We can just call that time-sensitive items that I would like to add under right after my coronavirus update. And then there was another item for action, which was the amended budget calendar. We discussed it previously, but I wanted to make sure we added that so that the council could go ahead and vote that budget calendar so that we could make those adjustments as we discussed in our previous budget work session.
So the first item, let's consider, that would be 10B, and what would that item be?
Time-sensitive items. I'll give
Now,
you 2. So those would be sewer update, and then audit engagement update. And that's for our annual audit that the county has done each year, just our general audit.
Okay.
They'll be very brief.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the items that was
I
presented.
do
by
have an
the-
item I would like to put on the chair's report, just to, it doesn't require that, just a report on it, and that is, we're having to have a presentation for our code rewrite, so I want to just mention that
But
regarding,
what, Mr. Livingston, I didn't hear you.
that is regarding our land development code rewrite.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm wondering, there is a motion that will be later made regarding an item that is slated to have a public hearing, and because of the motion that's going to be made later, I would like to request that we remove item 13B, which is the public hearing for the approval of the sale of certain property on Farrell Road, if that's appropriate to do at this time.
Yes. Is that an action item too? So you can remove the public hearing and the action?
That's correct, sir.
Okay.
The action item will be under the third reading, which will be item 15B.
Okay, just a quick recap. You know, the request was to add the 2 items per the administrator regarding the sewer update and also regarding the audit. And then also the chair's item regarding the land development code, and then the removal of item 15B and also the public hearing associated with that. Chair, entertain a motion regarding the agenda as amended.
Mr. Chair, I move that we
Mr.
accept
Chair,
as amended.
You recognize,
I'll wait till the motion is accepted. I'm sorry, sir, I'm out of order.
okay, it's the moving properly second, no further discussion reference the adoption of the agenda. Ms. Ross, will you please call roll for adoption of the agenda?
I have
Chairman
a
Livingston.
question, sir.
Please.
You recognize Ms. Myers.
I think Mr. Brown beat me to the buzzer.
I will tell you that you go first. Ms. Myers, please do.
Thank you. Mr. Livingston, I'm a little confused about what we're doing with Mr. Jackson's item. Is it coming off the agenda completely, or is it being
Yes.
moved to another place?
It's coming off the agenda completely. It's my understanding.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification, Ms. Myers. Any further discussion?
Chairman Livingston, this is the administrator, sir.
Mhm.
There was an other items for action, which was the amended budget calendar reflective of our work sessions that we would need the council to approve.
You did mention that, I think.
Yes, sir. So if that could
And
be added
under,
as other items for action.
Hold 1 minute, let me put it on my agenda so I won't forget it.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, this is Shakise Newton, if I could get in line as well.
You may go ahead.
I don't know if this needs to be added, but since you named the other item in the chairman's report, were you also going to mention the Prisma conversation that we had at the coronavirus ad hoc committee meeting?
Were we, Mr. Brown, were we going to carry something regarding that?
Yes, sir. That's under my report. I have a coronavirus update, but that would be appropriate to fall under there, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, all right, thank you.
Thank you. I misunderstood where that was going to appear. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, did we, Ms. Myers, you were finished? If not,
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Ms. Roberts, let's carry the motion then for the agenda as amended, including the last item that was mentioned by Mr. Brown.
Malinowski,
No.
Dickerson,
yes,
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Kennedy, Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
It passes.
Thank you. That brings us to item 6, the report of the attorney for executive session item. Mr. Cliff.
Mr. Chair and members of council, we have 2 items for executive session. Item 7A, Richland County versus South Carolina Department of Revenue, that's an update. And item 7B, Coggins versus Richland County, that's also an update, and both of those are pending litigation. And Mr. Chair and members of council, we do have outside counsel on both of those items.
The report of the attorney, those outside items per our rules, we go into executive session to consider those items because they're outside attorneys. Chair, entertain a motion for executive session regarding the report from the attorney. Chair, entertain a motion for executive session.
So
So
moved.
moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moving properly second. When executive session discuss those items. The master Ms. Roberts call the roll reference the motion for executive session.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker,
No.
Kennedy, Manning,
No.
Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
It passes.
Okay, well, now I'm entering to executive session.
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
It passes.
Thank you, Mr. Matt, for bringing that to my attention. Let me entertain a motion just to take the 2 items, A, B, and C for information. Can I take a motion for items A and B as it for information out of executive session?
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the, what did you say for information?
A and B for executive session items.
And I move that we accept A and B for information only.
Thank you.
Second.
Move properly second. Ms. Robinson, call roll for that motion in reference to those executive session items.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
I vote yes, but I didn't hear.
Just accept items as information.
Okay.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker,
No.
Kennedy, Manning, Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
It passes.
Thank you. That brings us to item 8 on our agenda, and that is citizens input. Ms. Roberts?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. No one signed up. No one submitted an inquiry for
8A.
citizens input number 8. Yes, sir. Sorry.
And then what about the second input, 9A?
Yes, sir. I have 2 submissions.
Can you share those, please?
Yes, sir. The first reads, "Good evening. My name is the Reverend Deacon Deanna Dederick, and I serve the St. Luke's Episcopal Church in the Waverly area of Columbia. The church and many of our members live in District 5. I am a resident of District 2. St. Luke is proudly home of the Fresh Start Mercy Ministry. Typically, we welcome our neighbors to come and receive food, laundry services, showers, clothes, food, and help with transportation and housing needs. Currently, we are one of only 5 food banks open in the entire state. Before 19 and even more now, one of the number one things that our clients share with us is their ability to pay for housing. Just recently, Monica, a client of Fresh Start, shared with me that she can only pay $50 on her electric bill each month because her rent is so high she can't pay both. Monica works at a minimum wage job to support herself and her 3 children. After paying the monthly rent for her 3-bedroom house, her take-home pay leaves only little remaining. Full-time at a minimum wage job in our community, you would have to work 89 hours in a week to afford an average 1-bedroom apartment. If you can even find housing, one bad day can make the difference between paying rent or getting evicted. Perhaps hours are cut at work, you get a flat tire, or your child gets sick. None of these issues should put families out on the streets, and yet Columbia has the 8th highest eviction rate in the nation, and Richland County has over 19 evictions every day. This is what I want my community to be known for. Countless families at Fresh Start in our greater community would hugely benefit from the establishment and full funding of an affordable housing trust fund in our community. As Executive Director of Fresh Start, I fully support these efforts and the difference it would make to thousands of people in our county. And as a clergy person, establishing an affordable housing trust fund is a moral imperative. As this is considered this week at the Development and Services Committee, I urge County Council members to please take the urgent action steps to establish the fund and fund an affordable housing trust fund. Thank you. The second comes from Carl Cox at 3924 Casino Road, 29205. My name is Carl Cox. I am a resident of District 6, attend Shannon United Methodist Church, and am the Director of Strategic Initiatives at Central South Carolina Habitat for Humanity. I'm writing today to ask the council to support the creation of an affordable housing trust fund to address the affordable housing crises in Richland County. Since 1985, the Central South Carolina Habitat for Humanity has been one of the leading nonprofits addressing the affordable housing issue in Richland County. We provide low-income residents with a path to affordable home ownership, and to date have built over 270 homes in the Midlands. Although the program is very successful, our ability to build homes has steadily decreased during the past 10 years. We have gone from building 10 to 15 homes a year to an average of 6 homes a year. This is due to a lack of funding. Despite generous donations from businesses, churches, and individuals every year, many key sponsors have less money to donate, and building costs have continued to rise. Unfortunately, as our ability to supply affordable homes has decreased, the demand has increased. We typically have 300 to 400 people interested in a Habitat home each year. Due to the long time it takes to secure funding, we only accept 6 to 10 people into the program each year. Most are single mothers with children, so each month without a safe, affordable place to live is critical. Currently, it takes 1 to 3 years after completing the program before a home has the funding to be built. If we continue to rely on the same funding sources that currently exist in Richland County, the need will only get worse. As someone who works in the area of affordable housing, I urge you to support an affordable housing trust fund as a solution. It is a proven solution that has worked in over 750 communities all over the country. Our local government leaders should prioritize ways to combat this issue, and a housing trust fund is the way to do it. Thank you. That concludes the submissions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And let me thank those citizens for submitting their input. That brings us to item 10 on our agenda. That is the report of the county administrator, Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir, members of the council. In your agenda packet, I submitted a requested document that was a result of our one of our recent ad hoc meetings. That is the documentation that you have in your packet, is the 68-page recently published but previously unpublished CDC guidance that was addressed in the council meeting that members requested that they wanted to see. Additionally, you have in that packet also decision trees that were a part of that guidance. So that information in your packet is a direct response to the request to receive that documentation. So hopefully you've had a chance to review that, and that's why that's in your packet. Additionally, Richland County COVID-19 committee met, and we discussed a possibility of collaborating with one of our local health partners, Prisma. As a part of that collaboration, we talked to Dr. Osment, and he communicated to us some things that Richland County could look forward to with a partnership with Prisma, if we so chose to go down that process. Some of those things included having Prisma as a subject matter expert with decision making, also assistance with the county's plan as we considered what it looks like to phase reopen. Also, Prisma communicated they will be interested in reviewing our protocols, also potentially providing some personal protective equipment assistance, as well as helping us to look at the data from Richland County's perspective to determine what things the council and the county should consider as it continues to try to protect its citizens as well as its employees. Additionally, related to our COVID-19 response, the county has 2 ongoing projects with small business grants as well as with nonprofit grants that are still ongoing. And so, Mr. Chair, related to the coronavirus update, I want to give that information to the committee. Additionally, we had some conversations about looking at some internal projects that the county needs to consider from a financial standpoint, but I will discuss those under the budget item that we'll discuss later. So that for the coronavirus update, Mr. Chair, members of council, that is the information I have to share for the coronavirus update.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the report of the clerk of council. Let me back up. Questions reference the administrator's report.
And I did have 2 other items, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I thought you. Any questions regarding the first part of the report? If not, go ahead, Mr. Brown.
So I just wanted to remind the council that we have a scheduled approved change to our sewer billing that's scheduled for July 1st. But there was some ad hoc committee, sewer committee requests that came down to the administrative staff. Staff has reviewed those requests, and from a time-sensitive standpoint, the council in this regular process, we have to give a 30-day advance notice when there is going to be a change. So any changes to that process or to those projected already approved rates, we need to discuss sometime in this month so that that advanced 30-day notice can still go out. So that's one of the time-sensitive issues I want to bring up that will need to come back before the body and possibly require a special meeting, Mr. Chair, members of council. The second deals with Richland County's routine audit processes. So it's that time of year for us to begin our audit procedures. And I want to bring that up because this is going to be a little bit different than my previous years. I know that we have a past provider that the county has used and has questions about. So again, that will be something that I believe the council will want to weigh in on, but that is also a time-sensitive issue that we need to address before the end of this month. So those are the two time-sensitive issues, and Mr. Chair, that will conclude my report.
Thank you. Any questions reference to administrator's report? If not, thank you, Mr. Brown. That brings us to the report of the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council. This office has nothing to report at this time.
Thank you. Report of the chair. You may recall we added to the agenda the land development code rewrite. You may recall we had a meeting scheduled with the consultants and was not able to hold that meeting. We need to reschedule that meeting. I have a request for that meeting to be rescheduled for May the 28th at 3 p.m. That will be before our public hearing on that day. So if there's no objections, we're going to schedule May 28th, 3 p.m. for the land development code rewrite presentation. That's all I have. If there's no questions reference that item, we'll send that out. That brings us to item 13, which 13 is open and closed public hearings. 13A is a public hearing authorized expansion of the boundaries of the I-77 corridor region industrial park jointly developed with Fairfield County to include certain property located in Richland County. The execution and delivery of a public infrastructure credit agreement to provide for public infrastructure credits to 604 PG LLC and other related matters. That public hearing is now open. Mrs. Roberts, did anyone submit anything reference that public hearing?
Yes, sir. We have 3 submissions.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. Can you share those?
Yes, sir. Dear County Council, PMC has been a responsible and conscientious corporate citizen of the Richland County community for the past 17 years. PMC has developed and locally manages 5 mixed-use projects. These holdings contain more than 860 market-rate apartments, which include on-site parking and some retail. While most developers may build and then manage their projects from afar, PMC currently employs 27 full-time employees within the Richland County area to service and manage our portfolio. The portfolio includes adaptive reuse projects such as Olympia and Granby Mills, the Metal Compress Building, and the ground-up new construction at 612 Whaley Street, the cottages at Granby, and numerous single-family homes within the Mill District. We invested more than $170 million in these projects. We look forward to continuing in local development opportunities, and I am available and can be reached on my cell phone should the council or community have any questions. Sincerely, Dan Rothschild and Josh Harding at 510 Haywood Street, 29201. The second comes from Hal Stevenson and reads, the Congaree Vista Commercial Property Owners Association would like to endorse PMC Properties project at Blossom and Huger Street next to Palmetto Compress. PMC has built quality projects in Columbia, including the Olympia Mills Compress and the high-end market rate apartments that they create would be a perfect use for that location. PMC has transformed many areas in our downtown and has been a positive member of the Columbia community. Best regards. And lastly, as counsel for PMC Property Group and 604 Huger LLC, I will be available by cell during the public hearing if you have questions. As information, the project has passed both readings with Columbia City Council. This comes from W. Leighton Lord III at 1230 Main Street, Suite 700. That concludes the submissions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. That public hearing is now closed. You may recall item 13B was removed. That item was removed, and also the public hearing for that item. That brings us to item 14, approval of consent items. Item 14A, an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2020 general fund annual budget by $455,259 to pay for in-car camera system for the Richland County Sheriff Department. This is the second reading item. The chair will entertain a motion for that item.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve items 14A and B under consent items.
The motion is to approve both consent item 14A and B. Is there a second? It's moving properly second. Any discussion reference to consent items A and B? And for the
Mr.
record,
Chair.
item 14B is an order amending the fiscal year 2020 general fund annual budget by $670,600 to pay for repairs, improvements at the central garage facility. And the motion is for approval for items 14A and B. And second, any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Newton?
this is Shakise Newton. Yes,
Yeah.
regarding item 14A, my question is, have we made arrangements so that we can pay this timely in future? I know that we're addressing this now, but have we made arrangements for the future?
Yes, ma'am. This is the county administrator. We have in our current budget process included that to make sure that that's not an issue going forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're quite welcome. Any further discussion? There being none, Ms. Roberts, you call the roll for item 14A and B.
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
yes,
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Kennedy,
Yes.
Manning, Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
It passes.
Thank you. And that brings to item 15A, our third reading items. 15A, authorize expansion of the boundaries of the I-77 Core Regional Industrial Park jointly developed with Fairfield County to include certain property located in Richland County, the execution and delivery of a public infrastructure credit agreement to provide for public infrastructure credits to 604 Hugie LLC and other related matters. The chair entertains a motion to reference item 15A.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
Mr. Chief Jackson.
you recognize.
Thank you, sir. I move the approval of item 15A, Mr. Chair.
15A, motion to approve. The second
I second, Mr. Chair.
is moving properly second. In discussion reference item 14A.
15.
That's 15A, Mr. Chair.
15A, thank you. Any discussion reference item 15A? If not, Roberts, I'll ask you to call the roll.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes,
McBride,
Yes.
Excuse me, Ms. Roberts. No, I wanted to be a no on that one. I'm sorry.
yes, sir. Livingston,
Yes,
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker, Kennedy,
Yes.
Manning, Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
No.
Newton.
No.
It passes.
thank you. And you may recall item 15B was removed from the agenda. That brings us to item 16, report Economic Development Committee. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 16A is the first reading item. It is the approving the transfer of certain property located in the Blackwood Business Park to Fairfield Electric and other related matters. The committee has brought this forward with the motion to approve.
You've heard the committee's recommendation on item 16A. Any discussion? Ms. Malinowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support this particular item. I just had a couple questions, and that is in section 2 on page 156, where it says any actions taken in the name of the county prior to the effective date of this ordinance with respect to the transfer of the proposed site are expressly ratified and confirmed. Have any previous actions been taken related to this?
Ms. Harrison is on the line. She will address this on behalf of Ms. Rubel. Ms. Harrison?
Hi, good evening, members of council. I hope everyone's doing well tonight. Mr. Malinowski, no, there have been no actions taken before this.
Okay, thank you. And my other question is, I'm just wondering if we shouldn't have some type of a statement in here that says if at any time in the future, the property is no longer used for the intended purpose that we're approving it for, it would be transferred back to Richland County. And I say that because I realize that we're building like a substation there, but I mean, whoever thought about solar panels on roofs or that you could talk to somebody on phone or that we could have teleconferencing like this. So I don't know what the future holds. It may cause something to come about that would preclude this particular type of method of transmission being used. And it just seems to me that to protect the county, that we get the property back if it's no longer used for that. That's all.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Miss,
am I recognized, Mr. Chair?
yes.
Yes, Mr. Malinowski, I certainly agree with you because this is very important to me at this particular point in time. I plan to speak with the chair of this, the economic development, and also I'll follow up with Mr. Rubel on this because I don't really fully understand all of the data that was included in the package. So I will talk to, this is first reading. So second reading, hopefully I will be able to get my answers to that. I'll follow up with you, Mr. Malinowski, and I certainly support your questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Ms. Dickerson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Myers?
Mr. Chair. Yes,
Myers,
sir, thank
recognized.
you. Mr. Malinowski, was your suggestion in the form of a motion? If so, I'd be willing to second it. I think it's excellent.
I can make that a motion so it can go back to the, not the committee, but the executive development director. And I would just like to add it as a friendly amendment to what is already here.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
I would
Malinowski.
second that, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? There being none, Ms. Roberts, will you call the roll for item 16A?
Malinowski,
Yes.
Mr.
Dickerson?
Chair, I'm sorry.
Um,
Mr. Chair, are we voting for it with the
Yes.
friendly amendment?
Yes, I
Okay.
accept the friendly amendment.
What was your question again, Ms. Ms. Myers?
Mr. Jackson set me straight. I just didn't know whether we were
Okay.
voting for it
Yeah.
with the amendment.
That's
Thank
what I
you.
accept.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so you may go ahead, Ms. Roberts.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes. Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes?
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker, Kennedy,
Yes.
Manning, Jackson,
Yes,
Myers,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
passes.
Thank you. That, Mr.
thank you,
Jackson,
Mr. Chair. That concludes our report of Economic Development Committee.
thank you. That brings us to item 17, report of the Rules and Appointments Committee. Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Rules and Appointments Committee met today. We had several items on the agenda. The first one, 17A1, regarding the streamlining of council rules to improve the functioning of council business. That one was held in committee due to the fact that several of the other items following this in today's agenda may affect the changes to the rules depending on what council agrees to do or not do with the other items. Item number 17A2. That item See, unless truly extenuating circumstances, agenda items should not be listed as title only. And that one was recommended to approve, and the reason was that the agenda items need to be there for the public for 3 times, and that some type of information should be present on an item so that people can see what we're doing at 3 particular readings, not just 2. So the recommendation was to approve that one.
You heard committee recommendation, right? Reference item 2, 17.2. Discussion.
Mr. Malinowski, I'm kind of concerned about removing the title only because sometimes we have some very time sensitive.
Absolutely.
We have some time sensitive items sometimes that may require us to refer to those items as title only in the first reading, it's entitled as title only. So I would prefer not to take that verbiage out of this particular. I would prefer to leave it as is and not, not have it just without title only, because sometimes we really need that.
Okay, Mr. Chair, can I respond to that?
You may. Well, you may, but I have Jackson and Manning next. So.
Okay, I was just going to say
And Kennedy.
It was felt by the committee that regardless of the time sensitivity, an item can still be placed on the agenda, that staff knows what it is we're trying to do, or a committee knows what they're trying to do. So there's no reason not to provide some information to the public rather than a blank sentence that says, we want this done. They certainly may know where they're going with it, even though they don't have all the details. Something could be provided to the public to give them a general idea of what the council is trying to do and moving forward. That was the reason for it.
Mr. Jackson, Manning, Kennedy.
Mr. Malinowski, I don't disagree with that in general. I would say as chair of the Economic Development Committee and understanding now after 2 years of chairing that committee, the competitive nature of opportunities in our county that we've lost out on because too much information got out in the public in advance. And because information leaked out, it hurt our chances for being successful. I would ask that there be a compromise so that information to help understand that this is a competitive process in an area of industry and keep it as generic as possible certainly would be a reasonable compromise so that people understand A, what area it's in, manufacturing industry, and B, that it's highly competitive. I think would be at least a compromise to the title only, but certainly I would really hope that we would not simply completely divulge the particulars of a particular industry's search for a location when we're in the final runnings of 2 or 3 cities and lose out because we reveal too much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I agree with you 100%, Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Malinowski, you can't.
I would say let's send it back to committee and have legal give us some wording to that effect.
I have Manning, Kennedy, Livingston, and Teresa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the wording here says, unless there are truly extenuating circumstances. And while I'm a little curious about who makes that determination, there is a little bit of clarification saying somebody was late getting it to us is not extenuating, which I agree, but the wording above is referencing truly extenuating. So again, I'm a little confused just in reading those 2 things because I'm giving an example of what is not extenuating. However, this is referencing truly extenuating, not extenuating. So I don't know whether our category is extenuating or truly extenuating. And I mean, I'm okay with that. I would just like to know who will be empowered to make the determination of truly extenuating circumstance. Thanks, sir.
Thank you. I have Kennedy, Livingston, and Teresa.
I don't want to go over everything that has been said so far, but I want to agree with Mr. Jackson, Chip Jackson, on what he said, and I'm gonna leave it at that.
Okay, and Mr. Livingston, quick, my concern that addressed already too, mainly was trying to determine what's going to be truly extenuating circumstances. And also too, I'm concerned about where most of the title owners are is with economic development projects. That's probably 90% of them. And I'm concerned about what that would do in terms of some of those major economic development projects. And the same thing with when we do our budget every year, we do a title only budget. You know, we may or may not need to continue to do that and move the budget process forward. So I'm just concerned. Those are some of my concerns. Have Horacio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to use this opportunity to advocate for as much transparency as we can get. I understand the need to be nimble and responsive when we have opportunities. And I also understand that we need to be able to be strategic in the way that we present information, especially when it's first reading. But I would also like to advocate for as much information as we can possibly offer the public as soon as possible when these kinds of things come up.
Thank you. I have Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just want to respond simply by saying that with these items being 3 reading items, I really, and a public hearing, I think that the opportunity to get further along than the surface level in the introductory level in order to get into the game is critically important. And I would hope that the public would recognize after that initial entry into this process that there are 2 more readings for public information to be revealed and a public hearing before any of it becomes final. If this were a 1 reading item process, then I would absolutely agree totally. But with it being 3 readings and a public hearing, I think it gives ample opportunity to provide as much information as possible as we move along the process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, may I follow up with Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, you recognize.
Okay, Mr. Jackson, I totally agree. Because, you know, like if you get to second reading, there are lots of possibilities for you to continue, hold things in committee, get more information. We have a lot of time to get information to the public, and I don't see where that is not being transparent. And I would think that either this go back, but I don't want to remove by title only from this because I think it gives us leverage, and I support not having that in a document. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
I have Ms. Newton and then Ms. Myers.
Thank you.
I'll wait and defer to Ms. Myers.
Ms. Myers, you may go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Newton. I was just going to agree with Mr. Horacio and say perhaps there is a compromise that we approve some specific language. I think Mr. Malinowski suggested earlier that this maybe should go back to committee with some specific language being included that just generically describes that something is for first reading by title only for the purposes of economic development, or something that gives the public some information and does not disadvantage the public, because the public is disadvantaged if we lose economic development projects that could assist in providing jobs and opportunities. So there is a public interest on both sides. But I would suggest that what we look at is a set of categories that we place these things under, and that, you know, staff is aware that it has to be one of these enumerated things, and as much information as possible be provided that way. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, is Ms. Myers asking that this be sent back to committee for additional?
I'm going to ask Mr. Malinowski, because I think Mr. Malinowski was making something to that effect, and I was going to get back to him to see what was he intending to make a motion reference to that or what have you. Mr. Malinowski.
Mr. Chair, I was.
Ms. Newton was going to speak.
It's okay. I was. My plan was
Myers, I forgot. Go ahead.
No problem. I was going to move that we recommit this to committee to develop the compromise language that was discussed today.
I'll second
Okay, you
that.
heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's moving properly second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I would certainly hope that the committee will invite members who have the majority of the issues that these categories would affect and impact for their input as well, in addition to the members of the committee, i.e. the economic development folk, for whom more than 90% of the issues they're trying to make a determination of title only would impact. So I would ask them to encourage those members for their feedback as they, the committee, deliberate the appropriateness of new language. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. There being no further discussion, I'm gonna ask Ms. Roberts to call the roll for item 17A2.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker, Kennedy,
Yes.
Manning, Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
It passes.
That brings it, Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 17A3. The committee believes that that item had previously been acted on and should have gone to council with their recommendation. So it's being held there in order to allow the clerk time to research it and find out exactly what that committee recommendation was, and then it will be forwarded to council. Item number 17A4, after discussion, the administrator and the clerk's office, the clerk to council, believe that they feel this is something that is very doable. And so it's held in committee to allow the administrator and the clerk's office to create language and details of how this can work and provide it to the next committee meeting, who will then forward it to the full council. And number 17A5, that was held in committee because there were legal questions and nobody from legal was present at the meeting to answer. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. That brings us to item 18, report of the evaluation ad hoc committee, employee evaluation ad hoc committee. Ms. Newton. Ms. Newton.
I've unmuted myself. I had a lovely conversation by myself a second ago.
All right, fill us in on
The Employee Evaluation and Oversight Committee met to talk about the evaluation process for the 3 current direct reports to council. If it please the body, I'd like to address items 18A 1, 2, and 3 together, as they have a similar action path. So the Employee Evaluation and Ad Hoc Committee recommends that we use a third-party firm to assist us with the evaluation process, and additionally to help update some of the job descriptions where needed. Procurement has advised us that we can extend the contract that we currently have with the vendor that we used for the search firm, and a sample scope of work was emailed out to council, I want to say by our deputy clerk. We, of course, have the option to modify that scope as sees fit, but we are nearing the time when we're supposed to complete the evaluation process for our administrator, if no one else. And we thought that extending the arrangement that we had with our current firm would give us both the best continuity, but also be a very efficient way to move forward. So again, the committee's recommendation is that we expand the contract that we currently have with Find Great People to assist us with the evaluation process and job descriptions for the county council's direct reports.
You heard the committee's recommendation in the discussion. Mr. Manning, Mr. Jackson?
Yes, I'll defer to Mr. Manning. I think his hand was up first.
Mr. Manning, you recognize?
Well, I'll go ahead. Maybe this was from another time.
Mhm.
One of the questions I have is, I see under 18A1, it describes the evaluation process. And I would assume that in order to do an evaluation, there was a planning part of the process, not just the job description update, but a planning where goals and objectives were set for which an evaluation would be done to determine whether they were met. And so I'm just curious in terms of where that fits, since evaluation was specifically mentioned and planning was not.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Newton, you recognize?
Thank you. That's an excellent question, Mr. Jackson. So one of the items in the scope of work, but we can certainly amend it if you don't feel that it was addressed appropriately, was that there would be a feedback process with all of the council members, also looking at previous information from our retreats and previous discussions regarding helping us to develop criteria. To my knowledge, the council never developed a formal document in advance about what exactly those criteria for evaluation were, which is why creating that is going to be part of this process, as well as having conversations with all council members. So that was it's not listed here on the bullet point, but a process or rather action items towards that end were in the scope of work.
And I guess I'm really more trying to focus on sort of the more broadly mutually agreed upon objectives, as opposed to the scope of work, which probably is much more defined based upon what we hope to see out of the job. Typically, an evaluation will also include those goals and objectives that both the supervisor and the supervisee agree upon as things they would like to accomplish, and then go back and measure, as opposed to the scope of work, which is developed before a person is even hired. And it can be general, but the part that I'm talking about is something that is very specific to the agreed upon objectives that each party wants to see accomplished. That's part A. Part B is in real time, since we have an administrator who is ready to have a evaluation done now, and we won't have time to develop the scope of work, what will be the plan for trying to do an evaluation for which there's currently no scope of work in place?
So I will try to answer your question, Mr. Jackson, and I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing while we're using the word scope of work, because I think there are two things that I think you're using to mean by that. So first, let me acknowledge that you are absolutely talking about a best practice for evaluation. And had we done this process differently, I think we would have incorporated what some of those things were beforehand. Part of the process that we're looking at with the vendor is not just saying, help us with this specific evaluation now, but help us as a council develop what our evaluation process is, not just for this direct report, but for all of our direct reports. So I think what you were acknowledging is for this particular process, had we started months ago, we would have done it a little differently, but we're here now, which is why the process calls for input from all of the council members. It also calls for a process with our direct reports, in this case, our administrator himself, in terms of developing it. But you're right, in this case, we're a little arrears, but what we're doing is developing a process that's going to help us move forward, because there are also other employees who have never received evaluations from council. So the plan is to address those concerns moving forward.
I guess my follow-up to that is that would the committee not consider then extending the period of time for the administrator so that you can put in place instead of trying to go back and evaluate what hadn't been stated earlier, put in place now what we would like to evaluate and roll it forward 8 months from now, a year from now, and just let the past be water under the bridge and have a fresh start. So now that everyone is on the same page going forward, because my theory is we may come up with some things that we think are very appropriate, measurable, and necessary in the position that were never agreed upon in advance, and put that person at a disadvantage now because we're trying to build the airplane as we fly it. I would rather roll it forward build in some time and say, go from this point for the next 8 months, here's what we think we should agree upon. And then let's come back in 8 months from now and evaluate that rather than not having it in place and doing an evaluation, in my opinion, in a vacuum. And I'm done. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Newton.
I have Ms. McBride.
Yes, just following up with Ms. Newton regarding the scope of services. With the administrator, we did, as you said, Mr. Jackson, we did do a job description, and a pretty well thought out job description, I think. And from the job descriptions, that's when you develop your tasks and your objectives. So I don't think it's going to be as complicated with the administrator, because we started a process when we developed the search for the administrator. And in fact, based on that process we had, but the council didn't follow through, an evaluation component with that, finding great people we're going to do. So it's not going to be as difficult with that, because we have started the process. But I would not oppose waiting till later, but I don't think it's going to take as long, because we did a long process in terms of getting comments from council members, external entities, in terms of the job description and everything. So that was a well thought out process. I don't think it's going to be as difficult in terms of finding objectives for the administrator.
To Ms. McBride.
Yes, sir.
And Ms. Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so to those points, I would just note that what came out of committee was that we bring on, or rather expand the existing agreement that we have with Find Great People to help us with this process. So there is still time for us, both as a committee and as a full council, to talk about what some of the specifics are in terms of time frame. But this is just to allow us to expand that contract so that we can begin the process.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Ms. McBride, your hand's still up. You okay? If not, there's no further discussion. The committee's recommendation is what's on the floor. I'll ask Ms. Roberts to call the roll.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
I'd like to abstain.
McBride,
I'm abstaining because I'm not really fully understanding the process and what was explained. So I have to abstain until I get further information. Thank you.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker, Kennedy, Manning, Jackson,
I'm going to also abstain because I'm not clear on the process in real time as it relates to the current administrator. And because of that, I'm going to abstain as well.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
it passes.
Thank you. Ms. Newton.
That concludes my report.
Thank you. That brings us to item 19A, other items. An ordinance authorizing a temporary waiver of late fees or penalties on the payment of hospitality tax, tourism fee, of development fees and business license fees. That the chair entertains a motion to reference that item. That's an item that came from the Corona Ad Hoc Advisory Committee a while back.
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
Motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Moving properly second. Any discussion? There being none, I'll ask Ms. Roberts to call the roll for item 19A.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker, Kennedy,
Yes.
Manning, Jackson? Mr. Jackson, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Myers?
Yes.
Newton?
Yes.
It passes.
Thank you. That brings us to item 20, the exception items. We don't have any exception items at this point.
Mr. Chair.
And that brings us to item 21, which is motion period.
Mr. Chair, I
Commissioner-
believe there was an oversight. There was a 19B added pertaining to the budget calendar amendment.
Thank you. That was added in. Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So as an introduction to that particular item, I just wanted to communicate that as a result of our work session, I do plan on sending out some correspondence to those millage agencies as well as our other partners and as well as to our staff that highlighted the conversation that we had about needing to prepare for potential changes to the budget and potentially reduction in some initial reviews with the budget director. We looked at a couple possibilities, and so we're going to be asking that everybody consider what their budget will look like if there was a 10% reduction. So I just want to kind of say that as I open up. The budget calendar is a reflection of what was discussed in the work session, which will allow time for the council to receive an amended plan with two different options so that you could consider what the council might determine. And I have Director Hayes on the line to walk through that budget calendar.
Yes, good afternoon. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the only it's two changes from the one that you previously approved. Millage agencies were originally scheduled to hold, and grants that is, were originally scheduled to have second reading this coming Thursday, but based off council's direction of wanting the millage agencies to resubmit true budgets, if you will, budget requests, we are asking that second reading be pushed back to Thursday, June the 4th, and which was going to be third reading, and third reading would be Thursday, June 11th. We're looking at two different tracks to the budget process this year, millage agencies or should I say non-general fund items being on track one, and then the general fund, actually, since the budget for the general fund, of course, has already been approved by council as part of the biennial budget, doing a budget amendment to it later on, starting in September. And I have dates that were submitted in the budget calendar. We chose that time because it'll allow us to get more definitive. We are working on projections for the end of the year revenue numbers that we plan on sharing with Mr. Brown real soon, who will share with council. But we'll have more definitive revenue numbers in June and July to be able to share with council, to be able to do a budget amendment. So we're looking at doing a budget work session when you all come back from after the August recess in September, and then having second and third readings for general fund budget amendment in the middle of September. And that will still allow us to stay on track for the county auditor to get the tax bills out and to report the millage to you all in the 1st of October. So those are the current changes. Answer any questions you may have.
Any questions, colleagues? Thank you very much, Mr. Hayes.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Myers, go ahead, please.
I just have a question. I heard the recommendation from the administrator and just would like to ask the administrator if you think that starting out with a 10% cut is sufficient, given that we're probably going to end up in a budget deficit maybe larger than that.
But Councilmember Myers, with sitting down with the budget director and looking at our internal numbers, initially we looked at what it looks like kind of across the board, and then we took that as a baseline and thought it would be a good baseline to share with those additional agencies just as a baseline. We also have a process where we're looking at where there may be some that's not across the board. That's the best way for me to say it. That is more targeted at areas that may be able to sustain a greater reduction. But for those external partners that we don't know that information from, we believe that was a good baseline for them to understand that at a minimum, that is something they need to consider in their recommendations to the council.
Well, that's exactly my point. That you just made the point for me that we don't know their internal constraints. But if we ask them to give us their best guess at, for example, a 15 or 20% cut, and we can go back and maybe give more back, we're in a better position than if they come with a 10% cut and we get numbers back later that make us have to go back in again. I think that it would always be better to be able to say, okay, the cut doesn't have to be as dramatic as that, than to say, you got to go back and now trim even more when you've given us what you think is the best you can give us. I just think that starting out with the hard question and ending up with an easier place might put us all in a better position.
And Mr. Based on what you all said, Mr. Brown, I am comfortable with the 10% cut. And part of the reason for that is, particularly in my conversation with the treasurer, something I didn't think about, and that is early on, property taxes are paid, and we've generated quite a bit of the property tax revenue that were used in the previous year, that we use this year. So it may not overall be as bad since our general fund budget is not based on where the big loss going to be in terms of sales tax revenues and so forth. So I can see how the budget director will come up with that kind of a number. Now, if we have to adjust a little 10% later on, we'll do that. But I think it's reasonable to start out with 10%.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Jackson has his hand raised.
Yeah, I said Mr. Jackson, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the issue for me is, I mentioned at the last budget work session, and it obviously wasn't an appropriate place to make the statement or to try to create the desired effect. And that is, if we are willing to consider changing from a biannual budget to an annual budget, then I think the impact of whatever the numbers are, once it settles, once the dust settles, once all of the revenue has come in that we know about, once we recognize the amount of revenue we're not going to collect, we're not locked in for 2 years. And so though I would like to see a higher number, I'm willing to do 10%, but somehow I really feel very strongly we need to consider going from a 2-year approval process to an annual process until we get beyond the current health, climate, economic crisis we're in to determine whether or not we can sustain these numbers for 2 years. We could probably almost sustain anything for a year, and this year is probably not a good barometer because the numbers that the treasurer are getting, as you just said, came from prior to Corona. So what happens next year when it's after Corona and the numbers are much worse in terms of revenue collected and we're locked in for 2 years? So I want to say again, if I need to send that to Mr. Malinowski, make that in the form of a motion at the next meeting so it gets sent to Mr. Malinowski's committee, I'd like to consider that because I'm very concerned that a 2-year biannual budget based upon very subjective, unrealistic forecasts right now is going to lock us in and put us in a horrible situation for a longer period of time than we can sustain. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Jackson. Your point's well taken. Any further discussion? Mr. Brown, anything else regarding the budget?
No, sir, Mr. Chair, not at this time.
Thank you. If not, then that now moves us to item 20.
Mr. Chair, do we have to vote to approve the consent calendar?
Yeah, do we need a motion on the calendar?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Malinowski, I'll accept your motion if you want to make a motion.
Yeah, move that we accept the amended budget calendar.
Thank you very much. The motion is for exception of the revised budget calendar. Second?
Second.
It's moving properly second. Any further discussion? There being none. If not, Ms. Robinson, cover roll.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker, Kennedy,
Yes.
Manning, Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
passes.
Motion passed. That brings us to executive session items. We do not have any executive session items that have not been taken. That brings us to item 21, motion period, change procurement rules that allow awarding a contract from a point-only basis after a review to one based on a twofold method. Points derived from the request for proposed review. Then two is bid among the project. That is, many companies are qualified and following review aren't recommended for the contract because they have scored one or a few points lower than the other competitor. Then when the bid comes in, the high point score may be several $100,000 higher than the next offer, who is also qualified. In a recent council meeting, the difference between the two companies awarding the contract and the lowest competitive price was nearly $1 million. That would go to BNF to talk about money. Any other motions that I do not have, Ms. Roberts?
No, sir.
If not,
I make a motion to adjourn.
it's adjournment.
Second.
It's moved and properly second. Ms. Roberts, call the roll for adjournment.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker, Kennedy,
Yes.
Manning, Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
It passes.
Thank y'all so very much. And I want y'all to know it's still light at my house.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm just wondering, you know. Thank everyone. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.